So we're up to part 7 of our sleep series. Now this one we're going to talk about dreaming and what are some of the benefits associated with dreaming and some of the interesting kind of work and scientific research that's being done in the space of dreaming. And I think that's probably the best place to start out with, which kind of is trying to answer the question of, are dreams can you predict dreams, or can you tell what people are dreaming about? And the answer is yes and kind of no. So the way they kind of went about this was they took a bunch of participants. I think this was a Japanese study. They took a bunch of participants and they showed them a bunch of images, from a car to a building, a plane, a person, a man, a woman, a dog, cat. They showed them all these different, items or pictures of some sort of thing, right? And they had them hooked up to MRI scanners or whatever, so they could take scans of their brain while they're kind of looking at these things. Then what they did after that, and the process of doing that kind of gave them these baseline brainwave patterns for when they were looking at a certain item. They reflected this sort of brainwave, and then while they were awake. And then what they did afterwards is they then put them into an MRI machine while they were asleep, and then had them kind of dream and get to the REM stage of sleep, and then they would eventually get into start dreaming. And what they found was you can actually tell what the person's dreaming about based off their brainwaves. So when the person was dreaming about a car, let's say, their brain was showing the same patterns and behavior as it did when they were kind of awake and looking at a picture of a car. Now the thing about this, and this is the caveat where I said no, not entirely, is they can predict what topic you're looking at, so they can tell if you're dreaming about a plane and they've got the brainwave activity of your mind when you're awake and looking at an image of a plane. They can match the two and pretty much with really high level of prediction be able to tell that you're looking at a plane. But they can't tell other kind of currently they can't tell what other kind of details, like what type of plane is it, what color was it, where's it going, stuff like that. They can only tell that in the dreamscape that you were in, you were matching the same brainwaves as when you're awake looking at an image of a plane. So it can predict that you were dreaming at a plane, and that seems to have very high prediction rates as a kind of technique and method to predict someone's dreams, or at least to be able to know what they were dreaming about. Now it does bring up a lot of ethical kind of considerations. If you were to take that kind of research and that topic to its logical conclusion, would it be ethically right in some respects to be able to peel back what someone's dreams are about? Because in many respects it's an entirely involuntary experience. You're not really unless you can lucid dream, then that's a little bit of a different story. But most people, they don't actually control their dreams. Their dreams kind of happen to them. So is it really ethically right to be able to, predict and read into someone's dreams and be able to tell what they were dreaming about? And especially if it gets to a point in time where instead of just being able to know that they were dreaming about a certain, let's say, person or or a certain thing, being able to decipher whether even more intimate details about what they were thinking about or what they were dreaming about at the time, it raises a lot of weird questions. If you've seen the movie Minority Report, where you kind of precognition and pre-crime, and imagine if you saw someone was dreaming about assassinating some politician, and through medical science, we could predict that person, was dreaming about them, and then they were going to do it, and then we arrest them ahead of time. You'd be getting into some weird science fiction-y kind of space if that kind of research and possibilities and methods have get developed to that point. So I think that's something over time humans might have to come to address with and make an ethical decision about what we feel comfortable with when it comes to being able to record or predict someone's dreams. But moving on to the next part, an important thing about REM sleep, but it really does need to be paired with dreaming. Like the two of them really need to be connected together for it to get the full benefits of that kind of stage. So being in the REM stage of sleep, but also being in a dreaming state is really when you get the main benefits of that kind of whole mechanism. And one part of the reason why it's effective is it reduces the amount of this stress chemical in your brain known as noradrenaline, which is kind of like the sleep version of adrenaline, but it also goes by the name of norepinephrine or norepinephrine. I always struggle with saying it. It reduces that, and what that means is that you can kind of go through in your dreaming state. Your mind has the ability to process traumatic experiences or any sort of negative experience without such a high level of emotional charge to them. So it's a lot less more threatening to your mind and your body when you're in that kind of dreaming REM stage, because that stress chemical has been reduced. So you can kind of tackle through these traumas and these issues without actually feeling scared or threatened in the dream. It kind of gives you an environment to kind of play around with things and experience these things in a way that you can kind of overcome them. Whereas someone who has PTSD, what they've found is people that have PTSD have higher levels of norepinephrine in their body. So when they do go to sleep, and normally the body should be able to kind of work through those experiences that they've gone through, because they unfortunately have higher levels of that stress chemical. They're not given that same opportunity to overcome that trauma. And in the end, that's where people who have PTSD have long-time sufferers of like night terrors and stuff like that, where they have these terrible nightmares where they wake up screaming and stuff like that, or completely reliving the negative experience, but also having the full emotional weight behind the reimagining it in the reimagination of it in the dream. So it's incredibly terrifying. And what a bunch of I think it was in some medical center over in America, what they discovered was they were giving these veterans, these retired soldiers and stuff like that, this blood pressure some sort of blood pressure medication. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it had this side effect where it actually reduced the level of norepinephrine in their body. So all these soldiers were coming back to the medical center kind of going doctor, I can't believe it, this drug has cured my within weeks, this drug is made my issues with all my PTSD and stuff like that so much more manageable, and my depression feels a lot less worse from it. So they were kind of praising the drug, and the doctor couldn't really figure it out why this blood pressure medication was having such a positive effect on the patient's mental illness. So what ended up happening was that doctor who was issuing out the blood pressure medication ended up getting, I think was at a conference of some sort with where the author of the book was, and the two of them ended up kind of linking up and having a chat. And what they kind of eventually teased out was that the Michael Walker, or whatever his name is, the author of the book, kind of explained that this stress hormone could have in sleep, when you're well rested and you're in REM dream sleep, your norepinephrine levels go down, and that kind of gives you that ability to process through the negative emotions. And then the doctor kind of was like, I've got a live test case of that, where it's just and they looked at the data together, and it was kind of it seems to be a causal thing where they found a straight up relationship between the levels of norepinephrine and the ability for these PTSD sufferers to overcome their experiences and reduce their levels of depression. So that's one thing that I think is probably one of the most fundamental benefits of dreaming and REM tied in together with REM sleep, is that it kind of gives you that opportunity to overcome those negative experiences without the full force of the emotional weight of that experience bearing down on you. And just to go back to quickly, sorry, I should have mentioned it earlier, but just to quickly go back to the whole kind of predictive stuff of dreams. A lot of people think that, when you're dreaming, you'll tend to have, your dreams will tend to be about the events of your day. Not entirely. So they got a bunch of people to kind of like write journals that they journaled their whole day, all their experiences and stuff like that. And then what they did is they had a dream journal where they went to bed, and then the next day they woke up and they wrote down everything about the dreams they experienced. What they found was that it's not the content of your day that kind of is played out or can predict what you'll dream about. It's more the emotions that you experienced during the day. So if you're really stressed or angry or something, or happy or something like that, it tends to have a high predictive ability that you'll experience that emotion in the context of whatever dream you'll have that night. So that's kind of like, and that ties back to what we were talking about, the norepinephrine and stuff like that, is, depending on what emotions you'll feel, you'll experience those same kind of emotions, but at a less muted, or like a more muted, if your norepinephrine levels have been reduced due to good amounts of sleep. Now, the kind of second positive kind of thing I want to talk about, and this kind of comes through REM and the dreaming connection, where it has a really positive benefit when it comes to social interactions in your day-to-day. What happens is a well-rested person is more able to decipher and discern other people's expressions, and especially complex ones, where it's not like someone's like super angry. Like if someone's super angry, everyone can kind of tell that, but more of the more subtle, vague facial expressions which imply something, maybe imply something that you might not expect. But you can only kind of really predict and read that and be able to behaviorally understand what message is being sent if you are well rested. Whereas if you don't get a full amount of sleep, what ends up happening is your mind tends to be more skewed in its perception of other people's facial expressions and just expressions in generally. You tend to perceive them as being more hostile and aggressive than they actually are. So when you're in that kind of state where you think everyone's kind of attacking you, you tend to lash out yourself and kind of attack them. And where the lack of sleep kind of can impact that, social interactions, is someone might be saying something, or might have some sort of facial expression which might not be hostile towards you in any capacity, but your brain, due to being tired, perceives it as such, and then you kind of have a go at them, which then kind of casts a negative image of you in their mind. That they kind of think you're kind of a mean, rude person, which is not really good for kind of social interactions and relationships in general. So yeah, I guess to wrap it all up, being well rested and getting that REM sleep tied in with dreaming makes social interactions easier, because you can read people's expressions and with much greater ease, and you don't think they're being overly hostile towards you. And also it helps you to overcome negative experiences due to the lack of emotional charge that dreaming provides, where it reduces that, so you can overcome it in the dreams, in your kind of like dreams, so that you can then go about living your life not in fear or with phobias of some sort. So yeah, that's about it for this one. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.